couple of people that were having a little trouble getting here. We did have quite a few more people say that they were going to be here, but we'll see if they show up. But we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll begin with the recap of the prior meeting, so that if anybody comes over within the next couple of minutes, they shouldn't miss much. So, next, one more, please. All right, so at the last meeting, we talked about the capital projects that were part of the stormwater master plan that would address some stormwater quantity items. We presented two different scenarios. We presented $200 million worth of capital and then $300 million worth of capital. And then in that, there was that would be bonded, and we showed that how those rates would ramp up over the years as more money was required to bond those projects. Then we presented, and this slide, I think there was an error on the following slide, but we did go ahead and correct those. These were the costs that were associated with the various size homes based on just that the $200 million in capital, and then the 25 cents that would be that's currently been approved for the $6.5 million for compliance. Okay, so that's 85 cents per billing unit per month total, and that's what the various size homes would be charged annually for that amount of money. You'll see that the first two are the same amount, and that's because right now we're moving forward with the tiered system. Similarly, on the next slide, this is the $300 million in capital versus $200 million in capital, and the various cost of different size impervious areas for those. So with that, we decided that we were going to move into and revisit the different levels of service for drainage maintenance. Again, right now, we are working on compliance only at $6.5 million. Previously, we had presented $19.2 million as a minimum level of service, and then $29.2 million as a recommended level of service. And on the following slide, this kind of breaks down where those funds would be spent with those various drainage maintenance costs. This is a little different than what the overall numbers are the same, but some of the individual numbers have changed since the email that I sent y'all. And the reason for that is now that we are almost a year and 9 months into spending the ARP dollars, we've got a lot more data that we can put towards these. We know actual cost versus several months ago, we only had a few months worth of cost. So a few of these were adjusted, but the overall number is the same. And the ones that, just so you're aware, the pipe repair numbers and the inlet repair numbers are increased a little bit, and then the inspection costs are decreased a little bit. Everything else is the same as it was presented. I think that was WAC 2 meeting, and then in the email that went out last week. We like acronyms. So with that, the differences in the levels of service for drainage maintenance. So you'll see physical inspection, the minimum level of service is $3 million annually. The recommended level of service is $6 million annually. And where that $6 million comes in is we looked at the linear footage of pipe in the system, and then about what it costs to take a look at that pipe. And $6 million would allow us to inspect that pipe on a 15-year interval. Just for comparison, that's what we've agreed to in our sewer consent decree, that we would inspect the pipe on a 15-year interval. We're averaging a little better than that, but that's what was agreed upon.
You said the magic word, sewer consent decree.
Okay.
And that's stormwater sewer?
No, sir. No,
Okay.
sir. No, sir. That's sanitary sewer.
Okay.
I was just
Okay.
just referencing where the 15-year interval. I wouldn't recommend anything beyond a 15-year interval, right? In that, and that's the difference between the recommended level of service and the minimum level of service. With this minimum level of service, there's no, I mean, I guess technically if you did the math, you're on a 30-year interval, but that's not something that anyone would recommend doing at such a long interval between investigating pipe. But yeah, I'm sorry, that's sanitary sewer, that's a different thing. I was just explaining that's where we are on the sanitary sewer system. Same thing, for as-needed cleaning. So what we did was we said, hey, for that recommended level of service, we want to make sure that we look at the pipe on a 15-year interval. But we also know that things are going to come up and calls are going to come in and, hey, go take a look at this. We need to clean out this catch basin. We need to do this. So there were as-needed cleaning funds or inspection funds that were put into that recommended level of service that are not included in the minimum level of service. So that's the difference between the physical inspection items. The pipe repairs, and this is after having a little more, looking at this in a little more detail. With the pipe repairs, the average pipe repair right now, when you take out some of the outliers for some significant pipe repairs, we're at about $5,000 per pipe repair. So that 1.8 million, let's see, what is that? That 1.8 million right now, when you look at the service requests that are coming in, if they continue to come in at the same rate that they do right now, that would not even cover what's coming in right now. So we would still have to, this would really just be supplementing what drainage maintenance is doing right now. The recommended level of service at 2.4 million, that covers on average what is coming in right now, plus a little bit extra, with the thought that if you're going to go looking at all this pipe on a 15-year interval, you're going to find things in the system proactively that has not been called out yet or called in yet from a customer base that we would want to put on a work order to get fixed. So that's where that extra funding is placed there.
Adam, question.
Yes.
Is this all, the 15-year interval, is that also consistent with some of the things that, some of the practices from other municipalities too?
Yeah, I would, yes, anywhere between a 10 and a 15-year interval
Okay,
is
thank you.
best practice. Same thing with the inlet repairs. We went back and looked at average inlet repair. Again, when you throw out some of the outliers, it's about $1,750 per inlet repair. So just to address what's coming in, we need 600,000, a little less. But that's just to address just what's coming in from a customer complaint standpoint. Again, the thought process is if the more you go looking at the system proactively, the more you're going to find, and you're going to be identifying things that need to be resolved that someone may not have called in. So you need, if you're going to go looking for problems, you need a plan on the money to fix those problems that you've found. So that's why the budget is a little different there. Concrete line canals, we've got it at $750,000 annually, and what that's really to do is to fix spots along those canals. Now, there's still a lot of places where we need to make some very linear repairs. Those are going to be capital projects either way, but in the recommended level of service, that gives us some annual funding to go address these spot repairs. Whereas in the minimum level of service, we're saying, hey, we won't have the luxury of doing that. And if something does come up, or when something does come up, then it'll be planned as part of that capital work.
Thanks, Ed. Are we at a point where we no longer put in concrete lined, that we leave natural, or is concrete still a consideration in some areas?
I'm gonna let Fred
Okay,
answer
yeah.
that one.
That's a good question, Councilman, because, the best practices are not to do concrete lining.
Leave natural.
And leave it natural for water absorption and things like that. But certainly, there are areas that, because of the configuration of the site, you may have to. But our goal and objective would be more of an earthen channel and have a protected banks that can deal with that without using concrete.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
okay. And so, Adam, this line item, thank you very much, Fred. This line item, 750, would be, we've got concrete that's fallen in, that's caved in, patching, repairing that.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so where we see the issues with these is you've got a cross drain coming from the street to the concrete line channel that's most times in the rear of the homes. And that pipe has failed in some form or fashion. A lot of times they swapped pipe materials, so it was concrete pipe up to a certain point, and then concrete pipe comes in shorter joints than corrugated metal pipe does. Corrugated metal pipe, you can get it in a 20-foot joint. So you want that last joint of pipe at the concrete line canal to be a full 20-foot joint, and so you want it to be CMP. Well, the problem is where those two pipe materials were put together, they didn't have a junction box or anything like that right there. So there was a failure at that point. Then a sinkhole formed behind the channel, and then it just got worse and worse and worse. And then you pull that concrete panel back, and there's this void that you could lose a half-ton pickup truck in, literally. And so that's the issue. So we have to go in, we have to fix that cross drain, we have to flow fill it so we can get that material back and then put the concrete back. So it's not a cheap fix whenever we have to fix those. Roadside ditches, again, the recommended level of service is $1.75 million. That would allow that maintenance to continuously happen. With the minimum level of service, again, we're really just trying to, at that point, we would just be supplementing the drainage maintenance crews that are doing the work right now. And that's kind of how we're handling it right now with the ARP funds. The drainage maintenance folks are digging the roadside ditches, and then we've got the ARP funds to help them out and get caught up on that backlog. Non-roadside, that is going back to the earthen channels that Fred was talking about a minute ago. So that's the larger channels. There's a lot of places where we've got some erosion, that it's behind homes or businesses, that type of thing. And that money would be used to strengthen that earthen channel in those areas. That's where there's a lot of work to be done in those areas, and that's why there's not, I don't really think that there can be much of a difference between minimum level of service and recommended level of service, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done to fix items like that. Channel clearing, so this is, we've got a lot of this going on right now. We're using, with various projects, there's some federally funded projects out there that Fred's working on. Well, Fred's working on all of them, but you got some federally funded projects through, I guess, is it the Corps of Engineers? The Corps of Engineers, and then we've got some other that we're working on through ARP funds. But that's the larger channels, Jones Creek, Ward Creek, Clay Cut Bayou, Elbow Bayou. There's, I think, White Bayou up in the north. All those larger channels of getting that vegetative debris out of the channel. And what that really does is it keeps that stuff from eventually falling into the channel and then stacking up on the bridge piles and then causing an issue that way. So if you can stay on top of that maintenance, keep that stuff out of the channel so that when you do have a higher intensity rain event, you don't wash all that large debris down and get it hung up on a bridge and then cause some type of issue. You got a question?
So those were the 5 tributaries projects, it sounds like, through the Corps that's doing right now to maintain those long-term. Is this also include the cost to maintain the Comey Diversion Canal too?
No, sir.
And that's not going to be in this budget long-term?
That is not in this budget. I think that's I know.
Oh, that's right, you're on.
There you go. Yeah,
That's not in these numbers. That's about $900,000 a year.
The number that the Corps presented to us was about $900,000 a year, but that's subject to change based on the new numbers, and that's why we haven't looked at that from the city standpoint. What is that cost going to be? But it's a minimum of $900,000 just to dredge and the siltation out of the diversion is pretty significant, and that would be done every 10 years.
And that wouldn't happen till 2027 probably
Right.
at the earliest.
Right.
Fred,
Yes, sir.
it is an obligation of the city parish to do that maintenance, though, right?
Yes, sir.
And
There's
so-
no question.
Why wouldn't this stormwater utility district play a part in doing that stormwater maintenance?
I think the key would be is to make sure that we have numbers that are realistic. And because when you're talking about fees, you want to be sure that you're not dragging this cost out of the air from that standpoint. Yeah, we could have probably put the 900,000 in there and at least covered it at that point. But there again, I've been around long enough to know that you don't want to just put numbers in something. It can be added at a later date, that's for sure.
So, but for now, the expectation is that that work will be performed by drainage maintenance and the money will come from the general fund?
It would have to be at this point, but again, the diversion canal is a ways from being finished. And then even with that, I hate to say that, but I mean, that's, I don't mean that it's a little off schedule. How about that? At this point, and once that's in place, then once it's officially accepted, then we are responsible for maintenance. As it currently exists now, we are not. Estimates are about 900, but that again, you wouldn't expect to go right off the bat and be spending 900,000 the first 2 or 3 years for sure.
Thanks.
And then the last item on the list is the inspection, and that inspection is construction inspection, meaning that when these pipe repairs are being done, inlet repairs being done, various types of repairs, that we have inspectors out there making sure that the contractor is doing the work in accordance with the plans and specifications. This is the number that we lowered. We found that the numbers that we estimated up front were high, which is good. We are adequately covering the projects with the inspection firms that we have. We have 3 inspection firms right now that are covering all the ARP funded work. So we were able to lower these a little bit and then bump up the construction projects themselves and keep the number the same. The next slide is, we just pulled the average numbers of repairs over the last 5 years. So you can see and I went in complete years, so it doesn't include 2023, but we're averaging 444 pipe repairs per year and then 322 inlet repairs per year. And again, that next page, so that equals, at $5,000 a repair, that's $2.2 million just to get that work done for the pipe repairs. And then at $1,750, that's just under $600,000 to get those inlet repairs done.
That currently is coming out of the 9.5 million in the Department of Maintenance budget. When you hit that 2.2 in your current repair costs?
There, and then we are, between that and the ARP funds that we have, which will not continue into the future.
Yeah, but before ARP, it would have been coming out of that 9 million.
It would have had to come out of the 9.5 million.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So I think the next couple of slides were explaining what went into those numbers. And again, I guess that question's a good segue, because the emphasis here is that we have some dedicated funding to do maintenance on the drainage system, specifically the collection system, and then the open channels, and then that allows that $9.5 million that drainage maintenance has to do a lot of things that is falling onto the backlog right now, so that the overall system is better maintained. The other thing that's in there is we do have money in there for some capital projects, and that was a ramped up number that we had in there. So we were starting out at $1.5 million per year, and then we were ramping it up. So we had money in there for engineering and construction of capital projects in both of the recommended levels of service. And that would be capital projects that would, for the most part, would be outside of the stormwater master plan item. You know, you might find a subdivision where the pipe in a certain area needs to be upgraded for a significant length. That's not something we can cover on the point repair contract. So we'd have to have a capital project to address something like that. So that's what the intent was behind those capital projects. So the next slide, what we did was we just to put some numbers out there just to show what this would look like. If we did the $200 million in capital projects from the stormwater master plan, and then you put in the minimum level of service, which was the 19.2 million, then the billing unit per month is roughly $1.30. So that shows you where we are with the various size houses. So for instance, a 2,000 square foot house, you're at $57.20 annually. 3,700 square foot house, you're at just under $120 per year. And then same with the larger structures. The following page is again, 200 million in capital for the stormwater master plan items, and then the full recommended level of service, and there you're at $1.65 per billing unit per month, which puts you $72 for a 2,000 square foot house annually. And then, you know, just under $152 for 3,700 square foot house. So that gives you an idea of about if all these things were combined together, where they would land.
Joe, would you go back one slide, please, sir? That's the $1.30. Okay. Adam, sorry, so I can keep it straight in my head. 200 million. I'm sorry, I'm trying to craft my question. If we implement a fee that would start in 2 years,
Good point.
there's an increase. You get where I'm going with my very,
Yes,
very
no.
half-baked question?
Good point.
Okay.
So this was that's the number in 2035,
The 200 million.
the 200 million. So that's bonding all $200 million over 10 years. So that's basically in year 10. So if you go back to slide 4, I think Joe can pull that
Yes,
up.
the billing unit rates. Oh, thanks, Joe.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. So if you add, basically if you add 70 cents to those, that would be where you are. So in 2027, you'd be at 79 cents per billing unit. And then it would ramp up to $1.30. And we just rounded the 57 off to 60 because all these numbers are approximate at this point until we just really zero in
Okay.
on something.
Okay.
So
Okay.
essentially the 19.2 million works out to be about 70 cents per billing unit. So so in 2027, it'd be 79 cents. It wouldn't jump up over $1 until you got to 2030.
Okay. Then in 2027, under that $200 million scenario, folks could expect to see 79 cents per billing unit
Right.
on some bill. Okay. Thank you for that clarification, and I'm sorry to the committee if I wasn't clear in my question, but you did a great job, Adam, in interpreting what I was trying to say.
Thank you. No, good point.
The 2 slides at the end on the example stormwater charge are based on a recommended level of service and a limited, did you prepare one for the compliance level of service with the
So
$200 million?
The compliant,
With the example,
So-
yeah, the combining of the $200 million capital budget plus the compliance maintenance budget.
okay. So just the 6.5 and the 200 million is what you're saying. So, yeah, so that would be slide 5 is that one. Now again, that's in 2035, it would ramp up to 85 cents. So the difference, it's roughly, was that 45 cents? Because the 6.5 million is included in the 19.2 million. When everything is put together, that includes the 6.5. So we're just adding on that incremental amount. I know it's a lot of numbers, and hopefully it's presented in a way.
I'm a slow learner sometimes. The slide 5 includes the 6.5 million being dedicated toward compliance after 2026. That would have to be a new expense raised by the stormwater fee,
Correct.
in addition to the 200 million. Okay.
In addition to the two.
So that the header if we were to write it like the header on
I see what you're
slide
saying.
16 would read plus compliance,
Plus compliance, yes.
level of service.
We can add that.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
And that's the same for slide 6 as well. That's the 300 million plus compliance. And as I understand it, the goal of today was, if we kind of really get into slide 10, would be, what's the committee's thoughts on the minimum level of service versus recommended level of service for each one of these items? You could say, well, I want to fully fund one of these, but I'm okay with these others, or it could be the minimum, the recommended, or anywhere in between, or one way or another.
I just wanted to explain a little calculation I was trying to do last meeting, and I want to refresh my memory on this. So the Mall of Louisiana is around 167 acres. And if I'm doing the math right on this, and this is partly a gut check to make sure I'm kind of thinking about this right. If you had 167 acres, they think that it's probably 80% impervious area in their land area. And at that 85-cent fee, that's going to run them about $119,000 a year. And so in their business, you'd like them to cut personnel equivalent to about $119,000 per year, or raise rates on their tenants by $119,000 a year in an era when malls are growing increasingly uncompetitive.
That's not what happened.
That's the question. I think it's, and I understand we have the challenges, but I want to put it in the context of a very specific large concrete owner, concrete land area owner, and roof owner.
Right. And I don't know where they would, from a credit standpoint, I can't. They're a little bit different in that they don't have their own LPDS, they're not on the river, they don't, so I'm thinking, I don't know if there's any credits that they would be able to apply for either.
Even if they were, it wouldn't knock that down a whole lot. That's likely. I just want to put 85 cents in context of a, I think I've asked in prior meetings to see the list of the largest impervious area properties in the parish, just to be able to know, hey, let's have some real practical context. I mean, we've talked a lot about Breck and LSU and other city, or state of Louisiana, but like that's worthwhile, city school district, worthwhile having some real world examples of that level of cost and that level of service.
Yes, we can pull that. We do have it that way as well. We can pull that.
They have 167 acres. Again, my math could easily be wrong here, but that was our guess, was if 167 plus 80% is impervious, annualizing that monthly number of 85 cents. It might be worth it to have a teacher with a blackboard. Maybe Monique can help us.
I would guess that you guys have probably put a pencil to most of your big landowners.
We have, yes, sir.
Can we get that or not?
Yes.
I'd like to take a look at that.
Yeah, and like Sarah was mentioning, some of them, and I think the mall's probably one of, we need to make sure we capture all the parcels together, because a lot of them, they're multiple parcels. And Exxon is an interesting one, because they've got that area that they bought out, the residential area by the refinery, right? So they've got a ton of individual parcels right there. So that's what we have to make sure that we grabbed all of those, because it's not just you got the handful of big ones where their actual operations are, but then you got a bunch of little individual ones where it was classified as residential property. I think in a lot of cases it still is
there.
classified as residential property. So we have to make sure we grabbed all of those whenever we were capturing total landowners. They are, yes, they are. Right, because they still fall, and with the tier, they all fall in that lowest tier.
I'm going to think out loud here. Have we looked at other communities? I'm confident other communities that have some sort of stormwater fee have talked about the large impervious properties, businesses in their communities. Have we explored how other communities treat this? I mean, that's a hang up for a lot of folks, is to show the sheer numbers of some of our big job creators, big properties in the parish, and what those numbers are. So, I'm sorry, Black and Beach, have they offered up any examples, anything like that?
I'll have them answer that question. I know they have looked at it, yes. And I think that's where for the most part, that's where the credits can
Where
come
that conversation comes in.
In some ways, but again, to Mr. Knapp's point, I mean, it's going to be a significant number, especially when you start getting into these higher dollar amounts. You see it. I mean, when we were at the 25 cents for compliance, that number wasn't as significant.
Correct.
But it starts to grow.
Correct.
Once we add all these things together.
Adam, didn't we have a list that had the number of people that are entities that reached a certain level?
We did. We do.
It wasn't, it was just a handful, I don't have that, that was from a previous meeting. But you had, correct, you had.
Right.
Right. Am I
There were
right?
not, because it got to a point where it no longer made sense to put folks in the tiers and you just individually calculate them, because then you essentially just have a whole bunch of tiers on the higher end. But yeah, we can, I think that was the last meeting. I think I hear we might be getting some stormwater outside. That'd be nice right now.
If you look at the list that we had, there was only 2, it says residential parcels. Does it mean residential parcels or? This option,
That was the last meeting. I don't know if this is the.
this refers to it as, quote, residential parcels.
Right, because what we ultimately landed on was tiered residential up to a certain point, and then they would be
Billable units.
individually calculated. Then everything that was commercial, or everything that was not residential would be individually
I
calculated.
got you. Okay, so this really is only, I like to know the people who have the 500 to 750,000 square foot, and their annual charge would be 3,700. It shows there are two lots. I guess that's the Penningtons and one other people that I don't know. But then there's somebody that's at another 12, 15. So until you get to above 25,000, there's less than 100 total.
Right.
So not much, okay. On the residential side.
On residential, and we did scrub that quite a bit, because initially, they had some trailer parks in there and that type of thing, because they were zoned residential, so I think we scrubbed it for the most part to where it's truly residential there, but there are a handful of full of large tracts out there. I don't remember exactly where they fall, but one area that I do remember of is that Mallard Lakes area. They've got some just large properties in general in that area with some pretty significant impervious area on them. Anybody else?
So the question that's before us right now is, do you support this minimum or recommended or some hybrid of the two? Is that?
I think that was the goal of the conversation, yes, sir. I think we just, in general, we were going to, we landed on the 6.5, but in general, after the last meeting, the conversation was, do we want to revisit, if we're going to bring a package to the voters, what's going to be in that package that we bring to the voters?
On the previous slide, where we have the recurring funding, one of the questions I'm struggling with, and again, I don't know if it makes a difference in what we're talking about today, but we showed a slide where we do 400 pipe repairs and 300 inlet repairs every year, and so that funding is coming out of the 9.5, right? And so it's hard for me to reconcile the zeros that are there. Now, I also understand that once we have the fees, that frees up the 9.5, and I guess maybe to do other things that aren't listed here, and maybe I just need a better appreciation of what those other things are.
Well, I guess right now, we're not keeping up with the work that is coming in. So if we wouldn't have this ARP funding, we wouldn't be doing, a little over $2 million worth a year of pipe repairs and X amount of inlet repair. We'd be trying to use $9.5 million. Let me back up. the Department of Maintenance contracts out very little work. They self-perform what they can. They do have a handful of things. They've got a spraying program where they spray the earth in ditches to keep the growth down. But otherwise, even if you calculated in-house efforts, they're not doing $2 million worth a year of point repairs or $750,000 a year worth of inlet repairs, because they've got that $9.5 million that's got to fund everything that they do, so they can't commit that amount of money. So that's why we've got the backlog that we've got right now.
And so the pipe repairs and inlet repairs from 2018 to 2022 was funded with a portion of the 9.5, or was funded as a portion of the AARP?
A little bit of both, but for the most part, we are using ARP money to
Contract,
catch
sir.
up on that, to contract things out and catch up on that backlog. Yes. So we've got, just to get into specifics, we've got a contract with Grady Crawford to do the pipe repairs, and then we've got a contract with NCMC to do the inlet repair. Those did not exist prior when they were only general fund dollars.
And how long or how many more years do we have the AARP money?
Right now, we got one more year. We got next year.
And so although it's not listed, it's that funding going towards, see how that, and I'm guessing it's the one-time funding, what we're talking about, AARP?
Right, yes.
Yeah, and so it's not listed as sort of going towards inlet repairs, so I'm just wondering, is that captured in the 5 million and these numbers down below?
No, it's not. The ARP spending is not in any of these numbers.
Okay.
Adam, just for clarity, I think one of the things that Corey mentioned was that the 9.5 would free up if this fee was passed, but that's not what you guys envision, right? The 9.5 will continue to go towards drainage maintenance.
Towards drainage maintenance, just other items that they need to concentrate on and put more effort towards. It would free up, it would allow them to
Free up money within the
concentrate
drainage
on
maintenance
this amount-
budget.
Concentrate on this amount of tasks and
Gotcha.
stay on top of them.
Gotcha. But we're not looking to use that money elsewhere
We
in
are
the
not
budget.
looking to use that money elsewhere.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if we just had a few more details on what that 9.5 would be used for. Because again, a layperson like myself sees this list of things, so that covers everything that DPW does. But obviously it doesn't. So when we say it frees up the 9.5, say to do other things, I think just a little more clarity on
We can
what
do
those other things are.
We can do that.
I don't think it should free up the money.
Agreed.
Yeah, I should. That's
Glad to
one of
get
the issues that people.
Yeah, and like Fred mentioned, there's such a backlog right now because of the lack of funding that we have, that there's gonna take some time where they're really catching up on that backlog. And then there were some items, there's a lot of things with levee maintenance that they need to focus on more. And just clearing streams, clearing beaver dams, that type of thing, up in the northern part of the parish where it's very much reactive right now. It would allow them to focus more of their efforts on those to make sure that those items are taken care of.
So let me ask the question this way. The 10 million recurring, which is in the general fund for maintenance right now, the other two, which was either at 20 million or 30 million of additional maintenance, if you didn't do that, you'd just be creating a backlog, correct?
That's correct.
And you'd have to somehow or another prioritize that. And basically that would say the system's just going to deteriorate again over time. Is that fundamentally what?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it. And we are, everything that is done right now is reactive. And like you said, it's putting out the biggest fire of the day. And if there were more dedicated funding to where we could be more planful with the work, then you could stay on top of things, because otherwise it's just whatever the problem of the day is, that's what we're fixing. But you're having to figure out which one of those things you're going to prioritize based on the funding that you've got.
So I'll just make a comment, two comments actually. One, I want to play with a couple of calculations. My own sense is we would expect this number to be smaller from a cost perspective, and that's not about service; it's about implications on business costs, and trying to find a balance, and also trying to find a balance for a community and a business community that doesn't understand this, has never seen any sense of it, doesn't have a whole lot of confidence generally in government. And I think there's a recognition that you're trying to find some way to balance starting something that's different and accomplishing a purpose at the same time as not jumping out too far ahead as has happened in the past, perhaps. And so my sense was, one is like maybe there's a way to it's going to be completely subjective, but try to find a number that seems a little bit more reasonable. The second thing I think is not related to level of service or price. It is the lack of community readiness to adopt this, and the probably the lack, if this is not coupled with some sort of substantial community education campaign and an enormous amount of time for public input, it's dead in the water anyway, which is the problem. No pun intended. I'm sorry about that. There's no problem. It's the same problem we encountered last year. And I think the challenge of what you're asking us for is, I think we're probably mentally calculating multiple things at the same time, not just impact to our community, but also kind of the feasibility of success. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes it difficult when you're framing things in both the political context, your own kind of representative group's context, as well as kind of this community mindedness that you've asked us to spend this 7 weeks, these 7 meetings working on this. And so I think from my perspective, if I'm asked to do that on behalf of our organization, we would try to come back with a number that I think we could say like, oh, we have to go shop around a number, but that if that's the kind of the range of potential prices and the maximum upside to the worst possible impacted bodies, mm-hmm. then we can go and make some phone calls and kind of get a sense of how people think about that number. But it takes some doing. Once there's a real number, like we've gotten to through this meeting, is now there's some real ways to do some calculations and have conversations with people. That it's hard to say that I know what my organization thinks about this, because we had to get to a place where we had a number to kind of shop it around. And ideally, that list of potential large concrete owners, large impervious area owners, you'd have on the BRAC side, have a chance to have some conversations with them to kind of get their sense of like, hey, how much do you hate flooding, to be able to absorb this additional price tag. And I think that's in representation, good faith to our constituency, what I would try to go do. And what I think you're asking us to do by asking us to be on this is to make those phone calls, to make that determination. The second one I don't know how to think about. I don't know how to think about the probability that the community wants to tackle this, is prepared to tackle this, understands what this is. And while you've been educating us, it's taken 7 meetings for me to understand this. And I don't even know that I understand a thing, but I'm trying. But I can't imagine you're going to get this much time out of a voter. ever. So I don't know what that would happen, that would look like. That I think is an enormous undertaking to do this community work you're asking all of us to participate in, but also the government would have to figure out how to bring that, the community along before that, they'd ever even consider voting in favor of it, not just the Metro Council, but the public when it ultimately goes before them. And so I think we all are motivated to be supportive given this, complex challenge you presented us. But I think it's twofold. It's one is, does our constituency think that they would, be in favor of it? Two is, how do you get the community in favor of this incredibly complex topic? So that's, did you know?
Yeah, I think to Adam's point, whether it's our own, it's my board, or whether it's the business community, or whether it's the general public, painting the picture of the problem. I think a lot of what we're painting the picture of in terms of the problem is backlog for DPW and things. And so how is that currently hurting our community? Is it keeping businesses away? Is it making the water we drink susceptible to different things? Like, what's the negative impact it's having on me as a constituent right now? I guess, how do we make it important enough for somebody to want to, yes, I'll pay a fee because not only will you get rid of this bad thing that's happening to me, but here are the benefits I would, if I told a business, yeah, you got to pay $119,000, but it's going to generate $200,000 in new business, new customers, or whatever, that's a little more digestible. And so I don't know if we've done enough to paint the picture of why the current status is intolerable, unacceptable, unsustainable, which is why we ultimately ended up bringing the capital discussion in, because folks understand the quantity dilemma more than the quality dilemma. And so I just think that's where we are, and sort of ultimately where we need to get in terms of how do we make the problem real enough that a solution is needed immediately, and the solution we're looking at is based on a user fee. So, I think we've had a lot of discussion about who do we charge for the fee, and does that make sense? Because this person has it. I think that makes sense, and I think that's good. But even before we get to that, how do we paint the picture as a serious enough? I don't think it's going to be MS-14 compliant, and the layperson's not going to care about that. Layperson's not going to care that you have a backlog of projects and that there's pipes breaking. How do we make it personal enough for folks to say your quality of life is suffering right now, and if we do this, your quality of life will be better, and just trying to make that as practical and digestible as possible is where I think we got to get.
So it sounds like we're talking about a community engagement effort. It sounds like we're talking about, public hearings, discussions across the parish. I certainly can tell you that, homeowners in areas that have flooded understand. I think it's probably easier for homeowners to make that calculation when their home or their neighbor has flooded than maybe it is for business entities. So the question is, do we feel like, I think, unless I'm wrong, but I'm sensing that people feel like we need some type of community engagement or community education effort to bring people along and have them truly understand what this is all about. And is that led by the administration? Is it led out of this committee? Or do we send both of these recommendations to the Metro Council? Because I know some of you have sent recommendations to the Metro Council before and watched them pull them apart and reconfigure them in ways that were never discussed in the original committee. So that's, certainly a possibility to happen at the Metro Council level as well. But, do we want to have a public engagement effort out of this effort, or do we want to send these recommendations to the Metro Council and then have the Metro Council, in collaboration with the mayor's office, have a public engagement effort, or does that rest solely with the administration and the mayor's office, and your office to lead that effort? But I do sense that that's kind of, to Corey and Adam's point, it's really constituent, citizen feedback that I think we're all hungry for at this moment.
And that, I guess, I'll just say, that is certainly the next step after this. And I think we just need to have, like you said, whether it's two or just some narrowed down version. I think we're getting there, right? Because we've looked at a lot of different options now. So once we can kind of bracket it and say, okay, maybe it'll be between here and here, then pose that. We can follow up with, to the point earlier, I think that's the only thing we've got the numbers, but I don't think we've given that to y'all as the larger commercial items, the malls, the Home Depots, just the larger shopping center types of what that would look like for those folks, and we can pass those along.
Adam, we need to come up with a number to go public with. We can't have a choice, because given a choice, the public will always choose the lower number, and the higher one will be thrown out. So we need to decide if we're going to go with the recommended or the minimum level of service, go to the council with that. This is what we need to do to get the job done. Go public with that, explain to the people why we need to do it. But we need to have one number that everybody agrees on, go to the public with that, don't give them a choice. Give them a choice, they're going to go lower every time. So that's what we need to decide here. What is the number?
All right.
I would, in reflecting back on the fiasco that happened in October of last year, I would sort of dovetail with what Corey is saying. You have got to sell this as what's in it for me, for an individual homeowner, because last time it was almost, you don't want the big bad EPA on your tail, so therefore we need to do this. Otherwise, we're going to have to live like we did with the sanitary sewer system problems. You got to sell it like, we've got some administrative issues associated with permits. We've got to do some maintenance, and we've got to address all those activities, or many of the activities that created some of the flooding in the parish. And oh, by the way, here's what's in it for you. If we can improve our FEMA rating, it should cost you less in your insurance. There's got to be some what's in it for me kind of talk when we go forward, not just if we don't do this, the government's going to come down on us and you don't want that. That's the way it was sold last time, and people turned off. And then we said, oh, by the way, you don't have a choice to vote on it, yes or no. So that option was taken away too. So those are the kind of dynamics that happened the first time through. And so let's take a look at, if that's what happened, what would we do different? And public engagement is key to this thing.
I think we need to get into the number by figuring out what the voters would tolerate, not what we think the number. In other words, we could come up with a number. I have a good number in my head, but I don't think the public would accept it. You have to figure out what they would tolerate, and that that has to be done by someone reaching out to the public, not by having just community meetings, but some polling and some information, and maybe the chamber can assist us in something like that. We got to figure out what is the level of tolerance that the public would have, that could say, I would be willing if this is and the question has to be posed. If we were telling you we're going to have all these, every 15 years, all of the big major canals would be looked at and done, we would have this kind of maintenance, and pose the question to them, and then we figure out what that is. I don't think this committee can come up with a number just on its own about that. I don't think that's folly.
Okay.
One of your mints right there, if that's not yours. I went to Gino's for lunch and
I've got an action item to follow up with some costs to various users at the different levels. I've got an action item to look into polling the public and see how that would work out.
So how much difference, and I'm sort of, responding to what Adam had mentioned earlier, how much difference is there from this proposal to the large businesses, to the big box stores and whatever, than what we did back in October? There's probably very little in terms of the impact if you go on a impervious surface area, right?
I'm trying to recall.
That number was
Was
like
it
$1.32 or something.
Yeah, I had $1.36 in my head. But so it was $1.30-ish.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was $1.30-ish, and that's
about what we got here.
Now the right now the difference is now we've got you've got a minimum level of service, and you've got $200 worth of capital in that. And then that's also in 2035. So you'd have several years where you would be significantly lower than that.
Yeah,
So
and I was
it is a different, I guess, but you're right. That was the number that everybody was had in their mind one way or another. But what would be provided for that number is significantly different.
But significantly more toward the water quantity side.
Yes,
Okay.
agreed. So you're saying we're good with that, right?
I was just stating facts.
No, that's a good comparison, though.
I'll just say, look, you and your team have done great work, and you've done a great job facilitating this committee, these meetings, and presenting us with information. The feedback that's sort of being directed at you, I think, is a good indication of, what we could anticipate to hear going out to a much broader audience. There's, well, wait, I have questions. Well, wait, what about this? So this is a good sort of starter for what we would anticipate. But I certainly didn't want that to take away from the level of effort you've put in here. You have not put in the minimum level of service on this, so we appreciate that very much. and to you and your team, thank you.
So where are we going next?
Well, I was about to. And that does kind of, because we have not finished the credits discussion, because we kind of said that, hey, we need to know about what we're talking about. I think because again, at the 6.5 million, it gets to the point, do you have a credit system if you're only talking about, and I say only talking about 6.5 million, I understand that's still, it's significantly less than what these other options here. But I understand to individual people, entities, whatever the case may be, it's still a significant dollar amount. So the thought was, do we entertain credits? Do we want to continue talking about credits? And because with that, when you have a credit program, you need to assume that a certain amount of billing units are going to be reduced by those credits. So that the 25 cents may end up being 30 cents or whatever the case may be. Because at the end of the day, if you've got a dollar amount that you need, especially if you bond projects, right? That's whatever they are. You got to bond that amount of money. You got to spend it. So, but the numerator's the same no matter what, but you got to get that amount of money with less billing units, which means the billing units have to go up.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, if we are talking that the committee would likely recommend something beyond the 6.5 million, do we want to have we'll get you the information that we've talked about, but do we want to have that discussion to talk about the credits? And we can present it. I think we've already got the spreadsheet where with the credits built in, right? You've kind of made some guesses on what would come out, who would get credits, that type of thing. So we know about where those numbers would be. Spreadsheet from meeting 5. I don't know if did we give them? Okay, so that may have been it. But we'll resurrect what we've given y'all. And we also have the individual the individual parcels with folks like with BRAC. You know, if you assume, okay, we're going to have you're going to do the education credit, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. The schools do the education credits. What that would look like. So we've got that in the spreadsheets. So that was the prior plan, is that the next meeting would be about credits, if y'all want to continue to have that meeting about credits, and then we'll get you those other numbers as well. But I agree, the public education component is the key to this whole thing. Whatever the number is, that's the major effort in this.
I would only just ask that as we continue to look at these numbers, and I know the desire is to see it move at least up to the minimum level of service, but at this point, all that this body has really talked about is compliance level of service, and the pages kind of toward the end or from the beginning, that I think it's important probably to make sure that compliance level of service is shown on the slide 10, for example, and then, continuing to kind of keep it in one of the options to continue to look at is compliance level of service plus capital investment, and the slide 15, 16 slides, just to make sure that there's consistency of design and communication, that we haven't made any recommendation. I think it's important probably to keep the $6.5 million option fully and clearly explained. Slide 10 doesn't say where that money gets allocated over the $9.5 million. I think it's worthwhile to make sure we all know what happens to pipes and inlets when you don't have minimum level of service, right? So I think that's useful information to make sure is on each of these charts as well when you bring that back, so we can see it just all full, straight up and clear. Like that's where the $6.5 million goes.
That's a good, but as I recall, there's been 2 recommendations made out of the committee. The first one is that we would be at that compliance piece only at the $6.5 million. And then the second one was we agreed upon the option 2, which is the tiered residential up to a certain point, and then individually calculated for anything that's non-residential and non-rural, I think is what it was. I think that's the 2 recommendations that have been made so far.
The third was to take off the table property tax.
That's right. Yes, we got rid of that one.
Yeah, no, only thing I would add, Adam, in the spirit of the public education and information, I would, and just so you know, as a person who stands in front of a podium and has to answer questions, I typically defer to the recommendations of the folks who are closer to the problem. We've had 7 3-hour meetings, and I would imagine we still know 10% of what you know. So I'm gonna lean on what you were recommending. But as we talk about the public communication engagement, I would challenge you and your staff to try and maybe capture that on one page to be able to say, this is the problem, this is why it's a big, important problem. We can talk about the MS-14, but we think, I don't know how much that's going to resonate with the public. And then just walk through that in terms of this is what's needed to fix the problem. Where does the funding come from? Well, let's look at who's having the biggest impact, and that's how we get to the impervious. And ultimately, this is the recommended or whatever amount that is. So just some 4 or 5 steps of, to try and summarize all of this so that it's digestible enough for somebody walking off the street to say, oh, I'm getting assessed a fee. Why is that? Is this something I could easily buy into? This another fee, I guess the other thing from a taxpayer perspective is there going to be a scoreboard or something for us to follow along? Said when they pass this fee, they'll be able to clean out this many ditches a year. Did they clean out I think just to put something in place to hold ourselves accountable as a committee to say, this is what we recommended, this is what we said it was going to do, and then tracking that to say, see, we told you it would do that, or here's the reason it didn't do that, although we told you it would do that. These are the, I think we got to kind of get to that place. But I think a one-pager that tries and captures as much as we've talked about and why a fee is necessary. And I guess the only other thing I would want to mention is that I always appreciated the compliance level, the 6.5, as what we would do for the next couple years until we had a fee in place. I never intended for the 6.5 to be until we change it, sort of thing. I still thought we had an opportunity to vote on what the ultimate fee would be, whether it's compliance, minimum, or recommended. And last but not least, I was not at the press club when the mayor mentioned something about the 6.5. I would want us to make sure we take a look at that. So again, I don't know if there was an expectation set that it's going to be just 6.5, and we come back tomorrow and say, oh, by the way, it's 29. How does that, how does that play into everything? So let's just make sure we're all singing from the same sheet of paper. I was surprised that the mayor shared that information to the extent we're still working towards it, but I know some of it had to do with the commitments from the budget and sort of things like that, which public information. But let's just make sure we're good on that message and that we're consistent. We're not throwing the public for a loop.
Well, thank y'all for being flexible and being here today. I think there was another meeting on Thursday afternoon that going to be here in the council chambers at the exact same time. So it didn't work out. That's why we had to change it. Hopefully our normal Thursday day, that was a one-off meeting. It's not a recurring meeting. So hopefully our normal Thursday is on schedule. Miss Lambert just walked in. She probably wants to say, why don't you come say something? I'm gonna put you on the spot. Okay. No, it's up to you. I was giving you the opportunity.
Can I just ask one more question on the large property owner calculations? I think we asked this in another prior meeting too, but are there examples, just like we did for residential to create tiers, are there examples of some maximum cap on any property that it doesn't go above, or commercial property doesn't go above a certain number in any other cities that have one of these fees?
I'll ask that.
So it also solves one of these potential problems is we don't have to lower the number to try to figure out how to make this palatable and, back and forth conversation. We can also say it's 0.85 up to a cap or something like that. And then how much does that affect your collections? Because it'll affect what you can bring in on the minimum level of service or what you can affect to bring into your compliance level of service. So I think it's worthwhile understanding, one, if that exists in other cities for incredibly large property owners or industrial or commercial users, just as we did on residential tiers. So I think that would be another piece that might give us some way to understand how to manage these really high-end costs.
Adam, I think the issue is for those who are currently in place today. Going forward, it is what it is going forward. In other words, I don't think there's ever going to be another Mall of Louisiana, but there may be a Costco kind of but going forward, people that are new development, that should be part of their consideration of impervious versus not impervious. But having something apply for everybody that playing under old rules, absolutely. And in some places, that's exactly what they do. I do know that.
Okay. Right. Yeah, and I know a lot of, and I'll let Black and Veatch speak to that because they know what's been challenged over the years, what's stood up to the challenges over the years. So I'll let them speak to that. That's where we need those folks.
Adam, I missed the last meeting. And Reed was here on my behalf, our behalf. Meeting before that, I remember Larry asking for legal. Yep, whoever gets whether it had to go to the border. We got that? Okay.
He's here, though. You can do that.
Good afternoon, everybody. So essentially, the resolution that was passed before the Metro Council is flawed. It was arranged and written in order to take advantage of both the public service law and the new revised statute that's been amended since. And so at this point, the decision would be up to the Metro Council and, of course, up to the department about whether or not they present it to the Metropolitan Council as to whether or not that resolution is revised, and we use the public service law, as we've done with Abrasco, which would not require a vote of the people, and then the Metro Council would set the fee, if there was a fee, or if that resolution would be deleted and the Metro Council would send it to a vote of the people, and then you would go through the, the steps to put that on the ballot.
So essentially, it's up to the Metro. Thank you.
That answer, and I think, and I don't want to speak for the committee, but I think the way the committee has been leaning lately is with the intent that it would be voted on by the people. That was the discussion when you weren't able to be here, that was the discussion at the last meeting. It does not, no, but I guess again, we're going back to what we need public input, right? And that needs to be a consideration as well. I think Ed brought it up earlier, one of the issues last year when this was brought up is, hey, this is the fee, and then this is how we're going to go about it. And a lot of the heartburn associated with that was that it was not being voted on. As of, I will confirm that, make sure that the chambers are available, but that would be the intent at this moment in time. Motion to adjourn. We got a second? All right, thank y'all.